Today, really, we're here for Better Baton Rouge. I mean, it's citizen-led innovation, and so we're here as an education cluster, a conglomeration of education nonprofits and organizations, really talking about how we can foster some common unity around excellence in education in North Baton Rouge.
Better Baton Rouge is an initiative in our community focused on citizen-led innovation. How do people of a community identify critical problems and then organize themselves to come up with different solutions to the problems? And this is part of the work of our education cluster, who've identified as their main issue raising the concern around excellence in education in North Baton Rouge. We hear a lot of conversation about governance, about models, about a lot of other things. And in our opinion, it's not about any of that. It's about a child being able to go to any school and having the opportunity to get an excellent education. So our effort is aimed at shifting the conversation to where it's one about excellence and how everybody agrees that excellence is what matters, whether it's a traditional school, a charter, a parochial school, whether it's Recovery School District or East Baton Rouge Parish. None of that matters if the child is not getting an excellent education. To give you a bit of background, I'm Raymond Jetson, and I serve as the chair of the advisory team for Better Baton Rouge, which is a community initiative focused on citizen-led innovation. And it's built upon the principle that the only way that real and meaningful change comes to any community is when the citizens of that community believe it's important enough to work to make it happen. And there are a number of folks in this room who are part of the education cluster for Better Baton Rouge who have helped to plan not only this event, but one prior to it. And so if I could give you a bit of background on how we ended up here as we are tonight. In October, as a matter of fact, on October 19th, we hosted a dialogue on excellence in education in North Baton Rouge. And we invited all of the people that you see here and their organizations to come, but the requirement was they could only listen, that they couldn't say anything, and that they would listen to a conversation amongst parents, students, community leaders, former teachers, former counselors, social workers. The one thing that they all had in common is that they had been employed in North Baton Rouge. And so we had an interesting hour-long conversation. These folks were gracious enough to give us notes on their thoughts about what they heard. And as the education cluster began to talk about what next, the suggestion was made that we would flip the script a bit and that we would allow these individuals and their organizations, with whom I will identify in just a moment, all of which are very active in this whole idea of educational reform in North Baton Rouge. Now, I believe that it is important that we not leave our agendas at the door, but that we put them on the table and be candid about what they are. The agenda of Better Baton Rouge and the education cluster is that we believe that conversations about governance and about models are misplaced if they are not all rooted in the issue of excellence. And that every child in every neighborhood ought to have an opportunity to go to an excellent school, whether that school is under the auspices of the East Baton Rouge Parish system, whether it's under Recovery School District, whether it's a traditional school, or whether it's a charter school, or whether it is a parochial school. None of the brands matter if what happens there is not an excellent opportunity for each child. And so we started the conversation to ask, what does excellence mean? And you will hear that question asked in a number of different ways today. And these wonderful individuals, and I'd like to thank each of them for being here, are in some way or another interested in this whole conversation, have thoughts, and so we're inviting you here to listen. There may be moments where we ask some of you to share a thought, but primarily we want you to listen. Hopefully you've signed in, and if you have, we'll give you an opportunity to chime in your thoughts on what it is that you've heard. I'd like to get the conversation started. Each of our panelists received a set of slides that captured the discussion from the previous meeting, as well as almost all of you were there. And in that previous session, we tried to attempt to describe educational excellence in North Baton Rouge. And I'd ask you, what was most surprising about what was and was not mentioned in terms of defining excellence? And Chris, I'll ask you if you would just start with your thoughts.
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks again for being here. I think it was actually a question you posed to the audience last time when you asked for a show of hands of how many folks thought that there were excellent schools in every building in North Baton Rouge, or even across this parish for that matter. And I think we had one hand that then sort of went back down. And it's just that fact that I think the purpose of our being here is why, so the question is why not? Why is it not that every school is that way? And then when you flipped it and you said, well, let's name some schools that actually are excellent. We could name 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 15, but when you started asking how many were there in this part of Baton Rouge, and we couldn't say that all of them were, I think that was the most, the most troubling part. And I think the part why we at New Schools for Baton Rouge really have come into an existence, because we think that question should be that every hand in this room could go up and say, every school, and to your point, regardless of what model it is, what the name on the side of the building is, that every school that a child and his family chooses, that's an excellent school. And today, unfortunately, as the audience said last time, we didn't think that was the case.
What makes an excellent school for one person may to another person not be a symbol of excellence. People have a variety of reasons why they send their children to a particular school. And in this conversation, the thing that I found that was most striking is that those who have no stake in the school don't take the time to really ask why it is that people have that affinity for that school. Why, for some people, they may say, I would never send my child to that school. But there are other people who would say, this school is meeting my child's needs. Now, it may be that in terms of statistics, there may be some people who would say, this school is not meeting the grade. But my own experience has taught me that what is someone else's problem is someone else's salvation. So what we have to start doing is talking to people in the community about what makes that school work for them on whatever level it is working. And then what do we need to do to make the school work better? And I think far too often people in my profession talk at people. They don't talk with people. They don't talk to people. They also don't empower people, and that's the one thing out of the conversation that we had that resonated very much with me, is that we don't empower people to be self-determined. Oftentimes when people are in communities that people perceive to be poor, they are perceived to not have the capacity to be self-determined. And I'm not going to be party to that.
Okay, and so certainly Raymond and Broderick and Eric, you guys certainly spend time in entities that are focused on people being more self-determinative. What are your thoughts on the comment that Dr. Taylor just made?
Well, I guess, and I wouldn't say surprising, but one of the things that kind of struck me from the previous conversation, once it opened up to the larger group, was the people in the circle, they had a definition of excellence, and there seemed to be a disparity between, I think, what the teachers and even the kids saw in this community versus what they were seeing across town. But I think it was a school board member that was the one that raised his hand and said that, that all the schools were excellent. And so I think on the one hand, while that's a great thing, and I think a lot of the conversation was centered around the traditional public school system. And so I think there appears to be some disconnect between, maybe the work that's being done and the effort that's being put in and those that are actually being served. But then I think also what kind of strikes me as well is that, and I think Dr. Taylor kind of touched on this in the last conversation as well, is how we define excellence. So we can talk about excellence as it's relative to everybody that's around us in North Baton Rouge. We can talk about excellence relative to this city and this region. but then we could talk about it, you know, nationally and on a global level. And so for me, when we're talking about excellence, I mean, I think it's important that we push the bar when it comes to our kids. And so the standards and our expectations we've got to maximize what we expect out of our kids.
Thank you for your comments, and it is that people in his field, his terms, who are engaged in education and educational change, educational reform, oftentimes talk at people and are not really focused on increasing the capacity of those folks to determine their own fate, their own ability. And I hope I'm not misquoting your thoughts. And so I would ask you guys, how do you react to that?
People, you know, you had students there, you had teachers there, and it was some, you know, pointing at the system, pointing at this, but it was no wrapping our arms around collectively, this is an issue that we're all responsible for us being here, and then no responsibility for moving forward. So that was missing in that last conversation.
I agree with a lot of that. I see a tendency on all of us to condescend down and blame up. So it's striking to see teachers who really know how to differentiate and make material very meaningful to kind of stir the brains and imagination of their students, then get in front of a group of parents and give them a 30-minute PowerPoint lecture that bores the pants off of everybody and leaves them very disengaged. That's usually because they're being treated the same way. So you get into sort of a structure where you condescend down, and the result of that is, I think, that feeling of disengagement from the larger power structure you're a part of. This is not a vehicle for me and my ideas. It's I'm a cog in the wheel. I think the thing I was most surprised to not hear in terms of defining excellence was, and this is having spent a lot of time meeting with educators over the last 6 months in particular, was that nobody said that the absence of stupid policies was an important part of excellence. Because there are a lot of people who are angry right now about policies freezing MFP for now how many years in a row, cutting funds to early childhood education. These, by any stretch, are not good policies for public education. And I think that grows out of that sense of disengagement when the school reform conversation and the policy-making conversation becomes disconnected from the people who are delivering that product. You get into a very dysfunctional and problematic environment that I don't think is going to lead to the sort of resurgence that we're all looking to see happen.
So let me ask, we have policies that do this, we have people not accepting responsibility, we have people who talk at folks rather than to them. We have one person's definition of excellence being one thing and somebody else's being another. Let's talk about your position, your understanding, your definition of what is excellence in education. Whether you choose to take it from the perspective of a system or a school or a classroom, what does excellence mean to you? And Caroline, I'll ask you if you'd start.
You know, as we're having this conversation, the first thing I would say is this is not an uncommon conversation right now across this country. I just was in Phoenix last week with about 30 other executive directors from charter school associations across the country, trying within our own organizations to come up with a consensus around excellence and quality and what that looks like. I thought when I looked, I did not participate in the last conversation, so I saw your PowerPoint, and it was surprising to me. One, it wasn't surprising to see all of what I refer to as the intangibles of excellence: community engagement, communications with parents, teacher satisfaction, those sorts of things, versus what I didn't see on the PowerPoint page, which was our accountability system. And our accountability system is such that it looks very specifically, I'll speak from the world of charter schools, but it also applies to traditional publics, academics, finance, and your legal obligations. And for policymakers and authorizers, their quality bar of excellence, it lives in those three areas alone. And for me personally, as I've worked with charter schools across the state for the last 5 years, I think excellence goes beyond that. And so you have the non-negotiables, those things that we absolutely know need to be happening in a school. for there to even begin the conversation of excellence, combined with the intangibles, I'll call them. Those things of an operator, such as a charter school's ability to engage parents, to engage teachers, etc. So for me, the definition is very much lives inside me. What I choose for my son, Owen, may look very different than what Superintendent Dobart is looking for. So I think it's hard to come up with just a set definition. It depends on who you are and what you want. And for me, that's what choice means and why choice is important. The non-negotiables combined with the intangibles and the empowerment to make a choice for what best serves me as a parent, as a student, and or as a teacher.
So I want to go to the two gentlemen in the middle, and then I'd come Superintendent Dobart, Superintendent Taylor. Both of you gentlemen lead systems that you certainly provide vision to them. And I know both of you personally and know that you are motivated to have excellence. And so when you think of excellence in educational excellence in schools, what does that mean for you, and Superintendent?
Thank you, Reverend Jetson, and I apologize for being late. I actually thought 2 hours was enough time to get here from New Orleans, and evidently it wasn't. But I do apologize. Thank you for the opportunity. I think I'm always brought back to, as a history teacher, by first calling in a profession. I've always had students learn a quote attributed to Socrates that says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is a habit." And so when I think about excellence, and when we talk about what we would want to see in the system, I think it's getting past the commonly used phrase of low expectations. And when we talk about excellence, it's exceeding what we consider to be the bare minimum, or exceeding what we consider to be average. You know, we just had a number of schools that was up for renewal and extension, and the minimum bar was 75 out of 200. Let's make it plain. 75 out of 200, and you hear impassioned pleas to just like give us a break for not making 75. When to me the conversation should be more, that's just the bare minimum of what we ask. And so if you ask me, that's not excellence. That's just trying to get to a standard set through an accountability system that speaks to just what average should look like. To me, excellence is always, we're talking about, again, on that same scale, the 120 schools, the 130 schools, where children are performing at such a high level that then it becomes a matter of what options they want to choose going forward. And so I look at that, bringing it to more a micro level, as to having like the highest set of expectations to get past the bare minimum and seek much higher than that. And so
for you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, for you, a score, something that is quantitative, is a part of excellence.
That's a definite part, because I think that's something that's quantitative that we can like put to it. I heard Superintendent Taylor say, and I agree to a degree when we say that what's excellence to one person is not to another. But when I look at a system, and when we talk about a system of schools, not only here in Baton Rouge, but just across this country, that there's such inequity that there are children and families and communities that are literally like decades behind. And when we talk about issues of equity and then trying to get to a level of excellence, you have to push, in my mind, to get to where that inequitable system allowed you to be so far behind. And so it's not a matter of just having this quantifiable number, which is, in my mind, that erases the argument if a kid actually learns something. So before we had accountability, we have to go back and remember children could leave school in the early 1990s or the late 80s, get a diploma, and actually think they've learned something, and then when they go fill out a job application, it's not even coherent. And then they're coming back mad with the system that failed them. So what we're saying now is when kids graduate, they at least have a bare minimum. And so in my mind, that's one set. Then another thing is raising the level of expectation for not only ourselves, but for families, for them to say, okay, if they speak to us and say, this is excellent, an excellent school where kids have shirts tucked in, and they're very polite, and they're still making this academic bar, then that's another level of excellence. So I think, to me, the strongest piece is having that academic piece. I just want to unequivocally push on that. And then the other parts that go along with it, yes, we want to have a dialogue on it, and we want to be able to say what speaks best to each community.
Dr. Taylor?
Again, I think that when you look at what is excellent, excellence, you don't arrive at excellence at the same time. And so when we look at what it takes to be excellent, an Olympic athlete, how many athletes participated in the Olympics and did not win a gold medal the first time they competed? What people want is excellence to be achieved by everybody at the same time. And that doesn't happen. Excellence is a process. And what I think we all have to look at is that everybody is not starting on a trajectory for excellence, because some people have to overcome so many things to get to that point. Can it be done? Yes. But we're always trying to say that everybody has to reach the same destination at the same time. And if they don't, then it's a failed system. And I think that when we talk about what's going on in North Baton Rouge, what we've got to start talking about is the fact that there are issues that have been allowed to predominate in this part of the parish. And the larger question is if we want excellence, why did we allow a concentration of things that overwhelm people to happen? Somebody made a determination that it was okay. And it's not just about the schools, because again, I think I said this at the last forum. Unless everybody has a job, and a good paying job, adequate health care, adequate housing, adequate education, then this is a community-based problem that education alone cannot bear the sole responsibility for. So, you know, when we talk about excellence in terms of accountability, though, there are schools in this part of the parish who are moving kids exponentially. But because they don't get to the magic number at the same time as schools that have other things that are built in that help them move forward faster, they're considered to be failures. They're not failures. And the other thing we need to be mindful too, when you label something as a failure, everything in it is not failure. There are elements that need to be addressed, but every child in some of these schools that are labeled C, Ds, and Fs, because in this state, if you're a C, D, or F school, somebody is saying you're failing. Every child in those schools, they are not failing. They're making progress, and they're doing fine. But in order for something to look good, something has to look bad. And I think this definition of excellence has to be one that takes into consideration where you started and where you got to over the course of time that you had to work with whomever you're working with.
And so as you have, and I'll certainly allow others to chime in, as you have put forth a vision for change around the whole family of school concept that has been embraced by members of your board, if you were to look, Dr. Taylor, 5 years down the road and it's accepted, things have been working, what is the vision that you would see as the outcome of that?
The vision that I would see is that, one, a child can articulate whether he or she is making progress. The other thing is that parents would be able to see where the child started, the trajectory of whether the child is making progress, and whether the parent feels that that progress is satisfactory. And again, I think that at the end result, the end product has to be that the child and the child's parent feels that that child is ready for the next matter in that child's life, whether it's college, whether it's some type of technical career type of endeavor, whether it's the military, whether it's going into the world of work, that the parent feels prepared. I know that there are things coming with the adoption, for example, the Common Core, that there are expectations for student performance that I can tell you right here, right now. Everybody sitting here, if you have a stake in education, the children no child is prepared, and I don't care if they go to Baton Rouge Magnet High, I don't care where they go. They're not prepared. And so it's a whole sea change of things that we have to start looking at, that talking about excellence is being determined for us.
by policymakers and others?
Absolutely, absolutely. So if the Common Core Standards is the bar by which we are going to be evaluated and be held accountable, then what we all need to be talking about is what is that going to mean? Because I can tell you unequivocally, right here, right now, what these children will be expected to do in 2014, they are not prepared to do, nor do we have wholesale numbers of individuals who are prepared to help these children be prepared.
The rest of the panelists, Eric?
And if I go back to the definition of excellence.
Excellence for you, yeah.
My definition of excellence. My definition of excellence is that a child would be in a learning environment where they have the ability to fulfill their God-given potential. That they're never maxed out. They're not maxed out. And so, you know, the most simple, concrete example I give, and, you know, I run into parents all the time that deal with this. Their child's in a classroom where, you know, teachers told them that they're too far advanced, and so they don't have time to deal with them. Or vice versa, child may get left behind because, you know, they're farther behind than the rest of the students. And so I think we have to create a culture, you know, given all the accountability things and everything that everybody has said, at the end of the day, it's about, you know, outcomes from kids. And so children have to be in environments where, you know, they are free to maximize their God-given potential.